Hi, I'm Rohan. Welcome to Western Speech and Debate. I'm going to be teaching you what Lincoln Douglas is, how a round works, how you prepare for it, what you're supposed to do, and most importantly, how to win. So let's get started. Now, what is Lincoln Douglas? Lincoln Douglas is a values debate. That means that the whole round centers around something called a value. I'll touch on what this is later. And it's a one-on-one format of debate, so that means it's the best way to test your individual skill. It's the most prestigious debate format, and it's really just one-on-one nitty-gritty. And it revolves mainly around philosophies, how we think that we ought to view the world, and stuff like that. Now, what is a value? A value is the most important part of every case. It's the concept that each debater believes is like the most important thing in the round. It's what we're measuring the effectiveness of your points up against. And LD is based on a clash of values. So, some common values include justice, morality, autonomy, societal welfare. So, this is kind of like the magnum opus, the jewel of your case. It doesn't have to be about your value, but that's what it's supposed to be about. It's really about what you can get to win. So that's why you want your value to be as strong as possible. Now, to help you understand values, I'm going to teach you about an example that the great judge Robert Bork taught me about. So the example is called Rick Smokes. So we have a guy called Rick. He smokes a lot and he argues with his wife. She says it's unhealthy. He needs to stop. But this doesn't appeal to Rick because he doesn't really care about health. He's sitting in the garage drinking Diet Cokes, watching football. Health is clearly not his concern. So the issue here is that Rick and his wife, they have different values. Rick's value is something else, it's autonomy, the freedom to smoke, or it's pleasure or something like that. But his wife's value is health. So Rick has a stupid case to her, and when Rick hears his wife's case, he also doesn't think it works out. So it's essential to learn values because this translates into real life as well, so you can look for examples. Now, what Rick's wife should have done is appealed to Rick's value, which is clearly happiness or something like that, so she can tell him, you'll feel better if you stop doing this, you will get sick less. And so that would appeal to Rick because he cares about happiness, not health. And if Rick wanted to make his case to his wife, who cares about health, he would show studies saying, this isn't bad for my health. So the key point here is you have to understand what the other person's value is and attack it based on that. And you also have to make the case to the judge, who's like Rick's wife in this case, that your value is the best, and that's why your debate matches up the best your contentions. Now, before you get too confused, the website and the Google Drive has a list of value criterions and values, so you can see examples and definitions of what you're picking for your case. Now, what is a value criterion? A value criterion is how we achieve or measure our value. So, like I said, the value is what we're weighing the entire debate off, and the value criterion is simply how we measure that. So, let's say I'm saying the government should invest in AI, and my value is morality. Well, to give you a way to measure how AI is moral, I would say my value criterion is quality of life, that it is moral that everybody has the highest quality of life. So I could make the case that, for example, AI would improve healthcare, and that is improving everybody's quality of life, thus, it's the moral thing to do. And quality of life is measuring my morality. So it's really just a word that we're using to measure our value. It's not too important unless it's pressed on, but you should still understand how it works out in your case. Now, ignore everything else I've said. This is the most important part of your entire case. I don't know why people pretend that it's not. When I started debate, people told me it's not that important. This is clearly the most important part of the case. So every single point that you'd have in a normal argument, like you should vote my side because point one, point two, point three, how we normally understand linear arguments, every normal point is called a contention. So each contention should have a name, and it's an argument that's supported by your value and your value criterion, and it's doing vice versa. It's normal to have two or three. You can have subpoints within the contention, but this is kind of useless. And then the other part is evidence cards, which are clips of evidence that support your contention. They gotta be from reputable sources. You have to cite the author, the organization, and the date, and you can kind of read it after you read your contention. Now, trust me, no matter what source you use, people are gonna attack it. So you don't have to be too nitpicky as long as it sounds legit. Now, if you're getting bored by now, trust me, we have a section at the end just dedicated on how to win. I know all about winning, I can tell you how to win, so trust me, you gotta learn the basics first. So, this is kind of the table of contents of what goes on in a round. I'm gonna get to each one of these more specifically, but we start off with the affirmative constructive, which is like an opening speech. Now, remember, the affirmative is the guy who's arguing for the prompt. The negative is the guy who's arguing against it. Let's say the prompt is the UN ought to establish a wealth tax. The guy who wants the wealth tax, that's the affirmative. The other guy is the negative. Now, in debate, you're always going to have to argue both sides at some point. So you're making two cases. But remember which one's which and which order you go in, okay? So first is the affirmative constructive. It's the AF. He's making his case, stating his contentions, stating his values, and he's painting everything out. Then is cross-examination, where the negation gets to ask some questions. You can clarify your doubts, or you can just attack the other person, which is what I'd recommend. And then we move on to the negative constructive, where the negative makes their case. This is also pre-written. But towards the end of the 1NC, he also talks trash about the affirmative and says how bad the affirmative's case is. Then is the affirmative cross-examination, and we move on to the rebuttals. So the first rebuttal, affirmative's always first. The first rebuttal is when the affirmative states why his case is still correct, why everything brought up against him is bogus, and also why the negation's case isn't that great either. Then the negation does the same thing in the negative rebuttal, and we always close off with the affirmative. It's kind of unfair, but the affirmative makes like a short 3 minute speech, giving his last pleas as to why he wins. So always remember the affirmative has the upper hand. If you're the negation, you need to attack, attack, attack. Now we're getting real serious. This is the first affirmative constructive, or the 1AC in debate lingo. This is like the most important part of the round if you're the affirmative, or it's almost the most important part. So this is the first speech of the round. It's always going to be 6 minutes for the AF, and this is where you're going to set up your arguments. It's read entirely from paper or a laptop. Most people use a laptop. Now, what most people do for their affirmative constructive is they state their value and their value criterion, like I explained earlier. Then they have names for their contentions, and they simply read out evidence cards, or like clippings from the Harvard Crimson or something like that. Now, you got to remember that most of our judges here at TCFL are parent judges, so they're not really going to care what a guy from the Harvard Crimson has to say. They're going to care what you have to say. So, what I usually do, and this is the formula to win. What I usually do is I write out my contentions, and then I kind of explain what it is, and I loop the evidence card in there like you would with an English essay and a double chunked paragraph. So if you read it out like that, you're going to do much better, and it's going to be much harder for your opponent to rebut. Now, what I mean by this is I'd start off by explaining what my value and value criterion are, how they relate to the prompt, and how they're the best way to measure this debate. So I'd go like, we should make policy choices based off morality because morality is the most important thing about how you govern, something like that, make it sound all nice. And after that, you're going to list your contentions. Most people would just say, a wealth tax causes capital flight, and then they'd read a piece from the Harvard Crimson saying this is why it causes capital flight and these are the statistics. That's not going to work. It's easy to rebut. What you got to do is you got to explain what capital flight is, why it's happening. So I'll give you an example. I'd be like, a wealth tax would cause capital flight. Capital flight is when all of the capital within a city, its investors, its upper class, the people who prop up the city's economy, leave because of a higher tax rate. And so that's what capital flight is. Now, the Harvard Crimson says that blah, 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 blah. And that supports my point. That's what you got to do. You can't just state the evidence cards and read it verbatim. You have to loop it in. And this is really a speech. So you got to make this a nice speech. That's what matters. Now we have the best part, one of the best parts, cross-examination. Now this is going to apply to both cross-examinations. They're both going to be 3 minutes, and it's going to be where the opponent asks questions about the constructive that was just read. So if the affirmative just went, it's the negation asking questions. The AF can't ask questions, they're just responding, and they got to respond. So the time on this is 3 minutes, like I said, but usually they respond to the last question, even if they go over time. And your goal is going to be poking holes in the other case and setting up your own case. And what you can do sometimes is if you have a hunch that your opponent doesn't understand what they're saying or they're just reading something, you can be like, can you explain your first contention to me and kind of get him to say it in their own words and trip them over. And you also have to press them on certain definitions. Like you got to ask them something really specific and hold their definition, use it in your own case. So you're going to be like in your next part where you rebut their case, you're going to be like, I didn't say this, the opponent said this, and it's clear that blah blah blah. You got to use their own words against them, and this is the part where you make their case look illegitimate. After this part, your judge should think that the opponent's case is as phony as a $3 bill. You got to really destroy their case within this 3 minutes. And if you really have some questions to ask, like some actual clarifications, can you repeat this? Can you tell me the definition of this? That's fine. It's just good to lace those between hard questions so you can trip them up. You really got to come out confident here, but always remember, don't be disrespectful. I know you'd like to insult the opponent. Don't do it. It's not worth it. You got to sound civil, otherwise you don't sound smart. You're going to lose the case. Okay, now we're on to the negative constructive. This is the first speech for the negation, and it's basically the same as the 1AC, but there are some key differences, okay? The next constructive is going to be 7 minutes. Now I can hear you behind the screen. Oh, Rohan, why does the negative get 7 minutes, but the affirmative get... So the negation is going to have more stuff in here. Part of it is pre-written, and part of it is you attacking your opponent's points. You just had cross-examination for a reason, and now you're going to use it. So after the negative reads his full constructive, makes it as convincing as possible, he goes on to the opponent's case, and he starts off by saying the affirmative's value is junk. His first contention makes no sense. His second contention, he made it up. He doesn't have a third contention. And so you call them all terrible, and you go back to what they said in cross-ex. You know, if you listen to his cross-ex, he said this, he said that. That makes his case make no sense. He said this, that makes my case better. His claim here supports my case. This is wrong verbatim. He's lying. So you got to have a spontaneous part in here where you attack the affirmative's case, and you got to hit as many things as you can, as many things as possible, because that's going to leave the affirmative scrambling in his next speech. I'll show you how. Now, this part is going to be the most difficult 4 minute speech of your life. It's going to be the hardest thing ever, especially if one of my debaters is up against you. They've already hit you on every single avenue possible, and you have to respond to everything they said or everything that they said, which is important. So the way you go about this is you're going to have your notes taken down, and only the points that they made which make sense. The points they made that make sense, you're going to spend the most time on. The points they made that make no sense, you're just going to point them out. Like, this makes no sense. So you spend 2 minutes attacking the opponent's case, saying, what he said here is outright false. His first contention, second contention, like I said earlier, phonier than a $3 bill. It doesn't exist. And then you move on to what he said about your case. You can divide this to 2 minutes, but that's if you have a really good opponent and your case is also mediocre. If your opponent's terrible, your case is the best thing in the world, spend more time talking about your case, or spend more time attacking their case. You gotta adjust this accordingly, but it's gotta be impromptu, it's gotta be clear. If you mess up here, you lose. If you don't win here, you don't win at all. This is the most important speech of your life. Now, if you've listened to everything I've said, your opponent's already thrown the ball by here. You just need to pick it up. What the negative rebuttal is you delivering the eulogy for the opponent's case. It's 6 minutes, you touch on every single thing spoken about in the round in the first 5 minutes. The last minute, you hammer on why you won. You don't tell the judge like some people do, I win because, I win because. You have to say, this case makes the most sense. Here's why. This case is the most logical. This case is the most beneficial. This case fulfills the value the best. You don't just tell the judge to vote for you like some people will. You can even take advantage of this. You can say, this guy's begging you to vote for me, but this is clearly the correct choice. You're going to touch on every single contention the affirmative had, everything they said in their last speech, everything they've said the whole round. This is like your opening speech in reverse. You're making your case, this is why I won. That's pretty much it, just don't say it verbatim. and make sure to go as hard as you can. If you go soft on the negative rebuttal and you just repeat things you said before, the affirmative is going to finish you off. Always finish the negative rebuttal remembering that the affirmative gets the last word. You've got to make this speech so good that no matter what they say, you've still won the round. After the negative rebuttal, you'll pretty much know if you've won or not, and if you haven't won, you need to come speak to me. But other than that, just make sure this is the most beautiful speech you've given. Follow the same instructions that I gave on the last slide. Put your all into it. Okay, this is where we finish up the round. This is the last part. You're gonna pack your bags, you're gonna clean up the stage. Don't actually literally do this. What I mean is you're gonna settle all the depths within the round. Whatever the negative has said in their last rebuttal, whatever really hits, make sure to address that. Whatever doesn't hit, you don't really have to address it, but make sure to cover all of your tracks, cover all of your contentions. You can go down one by one. This is why contention 1, 2, 3, they still stand. They're excellent. This is why the opponents, they're not that great. You can talk about one overarching theme of the debate. Like the overarching theme of this debate is that the affirmative lives in reality, the negation doesn't. The overall theme is that the affirmative has good evidence, the negation has none. And you can say, you take advantage that you're the last person speaking, that you have the judge's ear. You can say stuff that are outright false or nearly outright false. Don't say anything too crazy because the negation can't respond. So you can be like, the opponent has failed to spell out one single fact concerning my second contention. They haven't been able to rebut it. It's the greatest in the world. That's why you vote for me. And make sure towards the last minute you make this nice, neat, wrapped up speech as to why you won. If they're a lazy judge, they're just going to listen to this part. They're going to vote you anyway because you've been doing excellent. You've listened to everything I've said. But this last 1 minute should tie everything together. It should be neat, and you should be explaining to the judge why you've triumphed this round. Always at the end of the round, always shake your opponent's hand. Shake their hand, give them a smile, a pat on the back, say they did nice, and exit the room. What you do outside the room is your business. You can make friends with them or whatever. But while you're in the room, make sure that you're being nice and make sure that you thank the judge for their time. Always say thank you, judge, for your time, blah, blah, blah. Make small talk and leave. Now, congratulations. You've finished your first round. And hopefully, if you listen to everything I said, you've won. Now, this is the part that you've been waiting for. This is the part I promised you. The rules to winning. Now, you like winning. I like winning. We all like winning. I want you to win. And that's why I'm making this video. You're probably thinking, why should I listen to this guy? Look at the screen. I know how to win, and you're gonna win with me. Okay? The first rule is to attack, attack, attack. Attack every single point they make. Everything you concede is a negative. Okay? If you have the same value, that's all right. You don't have to attack their value. You say, my case fits the value better. All right, so you have to attack everything, spare nothing, and always remember to look at the judge's face, look at the opponent's face. Whatever sticks, whatever attack sticks, you're going to press on that later. You want to make them sore, so attack, attack, attack. The second rule is to admit nothing, deny everything. You don't admit mistakes on your part unless you've legitimately made a mistake. If they've rebutted you, you got to rebut them right back. Don't let anything pass unless you've made a huge oversight. If you're listening to me, you shouldn't be doing that, so that shouldn't happen. Admit nothing, deny everything. When they question the credibility of your source, you attack back. I use the Heritage Foundation as a source a lot, and people go like, oh, their board of directors wrote Project 2025. Something like crazy like that. You just gotta deny it, and you gotta say what you said again. You have to deny everything, admit nothing. So if you opened up saying the Heritage Foundation is a credible organization that wrote policy for Ronald Reagan, you're going to admit that and sound confident. How you sound means everything. Don't talk like how I'm talking now. Don't talk in a conversational tone. We're going to record a debate for you, and I'm going to show you how you should talk. Towards the end of this video, I'm going to give you a sample speech. All right? Make sure you repeat what you said. They failed to spell out a single fact, all right? Their phony is a $3 bill. Admit nothing, deny everything. The third rule is no matter what happens, whatever they say, How defeated you feel, you always claim victory, you never admit defeat. Towards your ending speech, I don't want you to feel discouraged. Even if you lose the round, I don't want you to feel discouraged. You're going to win the tournament, okay? So, towards the end, make sure to sound confident. Make sure to spell out why you win. No matter what they say, no matter how beat down you think you are, that final speech is everything. I've turned things around just with a couple words at the end. So, like I said, no matter what happens, always claim victory. All right? I'm gonna be giving you a quick speech sample here, okay? Make sure to sound confident but friendly in everything you say. I highly recommend you search up Mitt Romney, Mittromney, Mitt Romney, and just listen to him speak. He's probably one of the greatest speakers of our time. He knows how to say things convincingly and friendlily. He's the politician, governor of Massachusetts, senator from, I think, Utah. Okay, let's get to it. Good morning. I stand in firm negation of today's resolution. Resolved, the United States ought to become party to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and/or the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. My value for this debate is liberty, which emphasizes the importance of freedom from external control. Liberty ensures that individuals and nations maintain the ability to govern and act independently without undue interference. My value criterion is minimizing structural violence, defined as reducing harm caused by systemic, political, and economic structures. Structural violence occurs when these institutions or systems limit autonomy, impose burdens, or disadvantage specific groups or nations. By joining these treaties, the United States risks exasperating structural violence by ceding its autonomy to international organizations, leading to harm to its citizens, economy, and sovereignty. So there you go. That's a example of how you should give a speech. Like I said, listen to speeches, you'll get better at it, and that's pretty much it. All right, thank you for sticking around. Thank you for listening to me. If you have any questions, talk to me in real life. Just talk to me. Or shoot me an email. I'll always read your cases. I'll tell you what I think's wrong. I'll help you write them. All right? And we can work on things together. I want you to win. That's why I've made this. Trust me, it's going to be worth it if you listen to what I've said. And you can listen to any of these guys: Mitt Romney, Antonin Scalia, Ronald Reagan. Listen to literally anybody who has a decent following in politics. That means they know how to speak well. All right? And always remember, when you show up to the tournament, wear something spiffy, wear something formal. If you don't wear a suit, you're not going to feel as confident as a guy who's in a three-piece next to you. Okay? So wear something spiffy, dress up nice, and bring your confidence. You're gonna win. Don't worry about it. I'll see you there. Bye.